Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert. We're continuing our SEC football predictions today, and our next team had a disappointing season last year and had a wild offseason, but they bring in a new head coach and are looking to get back to a bowl. They are the Tennessee Volunteers. Tennessee started the season 3-1 last year before losing 7 of their last 8 games and seeing the end of the Butch Jones era in Knoxville. Now they bring in a new head coach in Jeremy Pruitt after a wild coaching carousel this past offseason. They thought they were getting Mike Leach from Washington State. Then they thought they were getting Greg Schiano, the defensive coordinator from Ohio State. And they thought they were getting tons of other coaches. And so they finally settled on Jeremy Pruitt, who I think in time will be the right hire for the Volunteers. The Volunteers returned 6 starters on offense and 6 on defense, led by Keller Christ on the offensive side of the ball at quarterback. The transfer from Stanford, which is huge for Tennessee because they were going to be struggling at the quarterback position anyways, but now they get a solid QB who has playing time in the Pac-12, who I was impressed with at Stanford. This is a big-time get for the Volunteers and could help them in their quest for bowl eligibility. And on the defensive side of the ball, they returned 6 starters as well. Nigel Warrior leading in the secondary, and a secondary that might not be too bad for the Volunteers. Could be one of their strengths this season. And Jeremy Pruitt, knowing how to coach a defense, we've seen what he did at Alabama. I think in time will get the Tennessee defense to a high level. But this year, it's always hard coming in with not a lot of returning starters, trying to put in your new offensive and defensive schemes. It's going to be a tough year for Jeremy Pruitt, and the schedule does not help them. They start off the season against West Virginia at a neutral site in Charlotte. And this is a West Virginia team that I really like this year, one that I think could compete in the Big 12. You've got Will Greer, one of the better quarterbacks in the nation at quarterback. You've got David Sills at wide receiver, leading one of the better wide receiver corps in the nation. And then a defense that struggled last year but returns 5 starters and should be much improved this season. Dana Holgerson's team could easily compete with Oklahoma and Texas for the Big 12 championship. This is a game that I think will be close because in the first week of the season is usually a time where you can catch teams off guard, or maybe teams that you don't expect to do well against a certain team could play much better than you expect. And so this is a game that I think could come down to the wire, or at least until mid-4th quarter, until West Virginia starts pulling away a little bit. And I'm giving the edge to West Virginia mostly due to that offense led by Greer and the unknowns of this Tennessee defense, the concerns I have about the Tennessee defense that struggled so much last year. I'm going to give the win to West Virginia, but in what could be a closer game than most expect. Then they come back home and beat East Tennessee State, no problem there. Beat UTEP, a team that didn't win a game last year. Then they get Florida at home, and this is a game that's, of course, going to be big. It's the one that Tennessee and Florida always look forward to every year. Tons of smack talk, big rivalry game. It's going to be an exciting game. I'm excited to watch it. But Florida brings in Dan Mullen, an experienced SEC head coach compared to Jeremy Pruitt, who at this point would have only coached 3 games, none against SEC opponents. Florida returns 19 starters, 10 on offense, 9 on defense. So they're much more experienced than the Volunteers. This is a game that Tennessee is going to give it their all for because they want to beat Florida. If you remember 2 years ago, they beat Florida, snapping that losing streak in Knoxville. It's a big win for them. But I just don't see Tennessee winning this game despite it being at home. I think Florida just owns the edge at both the offensive side of the ball and the defensive side of the ball, and I just don't think Tennessee is going to be able to get a win here at home. And then they go back on the road against Georgia, a team that beat them at Tennessee 41-0 last year. And that was also partially on their mind because, if you remember last year, Florida beat Tennessee on a game-winning Hail Mary 2 years ago. Tennessee beat Georgia on a game-winning Hail Mary. And so I think a part of that contributed to Georgia's beat down on Tennessee last year, and Georgia just being the more dominant team last year, no doubt. Georgia's going to be dominant once again this year. Could potentially be a top 5 team coming into this game, or a top 5 team to start the season. Tennessee going to Athens against a Georgia team led by Jake Fromm and DeAndre Swift and Mecole Hardman, Terry Godwin. So a solid offense against a weaker Tennessee defense, as well as a solid Georgia defense going up against a Tennessee offense that I think will be the strength of the team this year with Keller Christ and some solid wide receivers. But in the end, I think Georgia, with it being at home, gets another big win against Tennessee. Tennessee will put up some points against Georgia this year, unlike they did last year, but Georgia should take care of this game fairly easily, so a loss there. And then they get a much-needed bye week after back-to-back losses in 2-3, but unfortunately, they go into one of the better teams in the SEC West at Auburn, a team that beat Alabama last year and was nearly in the college football playoff. They lost to Georgia in the SEC championship. if you give Gus Malzahn 2 years with a solid quarterback like he has with Jarrett Stidham, you know he's going to be a dangerous team. Auburn's defensive line is going to be very solid. Going up against the Tennessee offensive line that I don't have a lot of faith in this year. It's a fairly young offensive line. It's not going to be one of their strengths. Auburn's a tough place to play regardless, and with that kind of offense and a solid defense, Tennessee I don't think has much of a chance going on the road here at Auburn. That's a tough little schedule there, tough 3-game stretch at Georgia, at Auburn, and then home against Alabama, arguably the 3 best teams in the SEC, and they play them 3 games in a row. So that's a very, very tough schedule for them. They come back home to face Alabama, who I think is on their way to a 12-0 season. So much talent on that team. Yes, the defense might be a little young, losing a lot of starters in the NFL, but that happens every year, and Alabama just always reloads, and Nick Saban knows how to coach that defense. It's at Tennessee, yes, but I think Tua Tagovailoa is going to have a big, big day over this Tennessee defense, and they're not going to be able to get a win here against the Crimson Tide, and I don't think anybody's going to be able to get a win in the regular season over the Crimson Tide. And so at this point in the season, you have Tennessee sitting at 2-5, and they are desperately going to need to start picking up the pace here if they want to get back to a bowl game. And luckily, that second half of the schedule, a little past the second half of the schedule, is more favorable for the Volunteers. The South Carolina game, not so much. It's on the road, Williams-Brice Stadium, a tough place to play anyways. And once again, another solid offense. If Tennessee's defense can really surprise some people, they might be able to hang in some of these games. I mean, West Virginia's got a solid offense. Florida should, Georgia should, Auburn, Alabama, South Carolina. A lot of these teams are very offensive heavy. So if Tennessee's defense can pick it up, and maybe Jeremy Pruitt can surprise some people with that defense, maybe they can win some close games or pull off a couple upsets and get to that bowl eligibility mark. But with it being on the road at South Carolina, Will Muschamp's best team, you got Jake Bentley and Deebo Samuel, and then 6 returning stars on the defensive side of the ball, and Muschamp being a defensive coach. I don't see Tennessee going on the road here and getting a win over the Gamecocks. They were a team that I think could surprise some people in the East, and that's another loss for Tennessee. And then they get a win at Charlotte, no problem there. Their 3rd win of the season with 3 games remaining on the schedule. So this month of November is actually very favorable for Tennessee. 3 straight home games and a road game at Vanderbilt. They're going to be 4 wins away after that Carolina loss to get back to a bowl game. Could they win all 4? Well, they start off well against Charlotte. Then they get Kentucky at home. And this is one where Kentucky brings in Terry Wilson, a transfer from a junior college, #1 junior college quarterback in the nation, dual threat quarterback, Benny Snell at running back, and a very good defense. One that's not getting a lot of attention but could be very solid this year with 8 returning stars on that side of the ball. And I'm actually going to predict a loss here for Tennessee to Kentucky. I think they win. I think they split the Kentucky-Missouri game. Maybe they beat Missouri, lose to Kentucky, or beat Kentucky and lose to Missouri. But I don't think they're going to win both. I'm going to give them a loss to Kentucky here, but a win against Missouri. I think, if you remember 2 years ago, last time Missouri visited, it was once again a blowout win for Tennessee. Missouri bringing in a solid offense once again this year with Drew Lock, another great quarterback. But I think they're playing for pride at this point. They're going to be out of a bowl game opportunity with the loss against Kentucky. But Missouri, I think Tennessee can definitely beat them. It's at home. Missouri's defense is a bit of a struggle for me. I'm in the middle on how well their defense is going to play this year. But I think that Tennessee offense is going to be able to exploit enough weaknesses and get a win over Missouri at home. And they close out the season against Vanderbilt, who Vanderbilt has owned Tennessee's number. I believe they've beaten them the past 2 years. So Tennessee wanting to beat their in-state rival, try to get a little revenge on them. But this is a Vanderbilt team led by Kyle Shermer, a decent offense, and then a Derek Mason defense that I think gives another win over Tennessee, making it, I believe, 3 straight over the Volunteers. They beat them in Knoxville last year, beat them in Nashville the year before, and I think they beat them in Nashville again this year. Another loss for Tennessee. I like this Vanderbilt team. They might not make a bowl game, but I think they have enough games where if they can win some close ones, they could get back to a bowl game under Derek Mason, who will be on the hot seat as well. So a very disappointing year for Tennessee, a 4-8 year, back-to-back 4-8 years for them. And I know a lot of people might criticize me for this, but the schedule is not easy by any means. And this is a Tennessee team that has a lot of weaknesses at multiple positions, namely, in my opinion, the offensive line for sure. They have a solid quarterback in Keller Christ, so maybe he will be able to get them some wins in some close games. Maybe they can upset West Virginia. Maybe they can beat Vanderbilt and Kentucky. I mean, this 4-game stretch here is going to be the key because I don't see them beating Florida, Georgia, Auburn, Alabama, or Carolina. So that 4-game stretch is going to be the key, and 3 of those are at home. So that's going to be really the defining section of this Tennessee year right here. Charlotte, Kentucky, Missouri, and on the road at Vanderbilt. Nothing is keeping them from a bowl game. I just don't see them beating Kentucky and Vanderbilt in that 4-game stretch. They easily could win both of those and get to a 6-6 mark in Jeremy Pruitt's first year. Regardless, he's the right man for the job, and wait just a couple of years and Tennessee will be competing in the East once again. So 4-8 for the Volunteers going into the 2018 season. As always, please follow us on Twitter at GridironExpert and also on Instagram at TheGridironExpert, and always here on YouTube. Please continue to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you next time on The Gridiron Expert.